I hear the knock at my door like at 7 o'clock. And I'm like, man, who's at my door? And it was a really stern knock. I look outside. There's two police officers. I'm like, what do these guys want? And I open up the door and they said, are you James Valenzuela? Yeah, I'm looking. I'm like, God, what did I do wrong? Did I not pay a parking ticket or a speeding ticket? Or I was like, oh, they got me.
Yeah.
But then they told me the story. They said, hey, we got some bad news. And the first thing I thought about my parents. I'm like, no, they said your brother was in a shootout and unfortunately was killed.
Hey, it's Lou Pimber. Welcome to Lou Pimber Speaks. Listen, before we get started, I want to remind you that I'm looking for people whose stories we can share and tell, because let me tell you something. There's a lot of you out there with incredible stories who've done incredible things, and no one's out there hearing these stories, man. I want to share them. You know someone, maybe it's your brother, father, your sister, a friend. Put them in the inbox. Shoot me an email. I want to hear about them. And I want to welcome you guys today. We have a very special guest today. Before we move on, though, I am the author of the book, Breaking Badly, my very own post-traumatic success story. I share that to encourage you that you also have a story in you that should be written down. Start writing it. People need to be inspired. America needs to be inspired. We need to hear those stories from people just like you. Now, let's get to our guest today. We have a very special guest. We have Mr. James Valenzuela, brother of a near and dear gentleman that I got to meet briefly, Officer John Valenzuela. Today, May 17th, we want to commemorate his memory. John Valenzuela lost his life serving our community as a police officer in South Tucson, Arizona. But today we have his brother, his baby brother, James Valenzuela. Welcome, James.
Thank you, though. I appreciate your time. I'm real excited to be on your show.
Man, thank you, bud. Thank you. So,
yes, sir.
I saw some pictures, bro. I saw a picture, for whatever reason, I thought you were the older brother, for whatever reason, man. And so because you have so much love for your brother, you've done so much to keep his memory alive. I think that's valuable. It says a lot about your family. So tell me about it. Where you guys go to high school at?
Yeah, I graduated from Pueblo High School. I was class of 1986, and my brother was class of 1984.
He's 84, okay, in Pueblo. So Pueblo Warriors?
Pueblo Warriors, yeah. Not the Coyotes, let's be real clear. I know they changed the mascot. That's a different story, but always the Warriors.
Yeah.
I'll leave that. I'll leave that for another. Yeah, I'll leave that for another time. Yes, sir. In Tucson.
Yeah, and that's in Tucson, right? Right there on 12th Avenue.
That's right.
And if you know, you know, man. Pueblo always reminds me of like the girls who used to scrap right there at that high school, man.
Right. Those. I'll just say it. I guess I'll say it on the record. Those used to be some of the best fights. I'll just leave it at that.
Let me tell you, so they were some of the worst, best ones ever. Man.
For sure.
So welcome today, man. So you're living in Tucson still? Is that where you're at?
I actually live right outside of Tucson in Sahuarita.
You're in Sahuarita. Okay, very good. And so tell me about your brother, man. So you guys, obviously you guys were pretty close to each other, right?
We were. He was about 2 years older than me.
Okay. And what was your brother like, man? Well, tell me about your brother. What was he like as a kid?
My brother, typical older brother. He's always picking on you. He would pass by for no reason. I'm sitting there watching TV, slap me on the head. I guess I guess as a younger brother, I guess that's always the rite of passage, if you will, and the duty of an older brother to beat up on the other one. But on the flip side, some of the things he did really did help shape me who I am today, made me a little tougher, built that character. I think that's super important. And it's something I carry on in my professional life is he helped me do that all the way through. Never realized how much of an impact those little things, even though annoying at the time, were very, very key to building the person I am today. And it's odd when you look back on it. I think wouldn't trade it for the world.
Now, James, where you and John grow up at?
We grew up in, of course, in South Tucson, which right down the street on Belmar, 3709 South Belmar, little house there. My parents bought it. At the time, I think my mom and dad said, "Oh, they spent a fortune. It was $25,000. I would give anything to buy a house for $25,000." A little house. They scraped up some money, and we actually right down the street from it was Hollinger, and then you had Wakefield, and then you had Pueblo. They're all within a quarter of a mile walking distance. Veterans Hospital was right down the road on 6th, so we were between 6th and Naho.
So you guys were like in the big city. You guys were not in the city of South Tucson. You guys were living large in the city of Tucson.
Yeah, if you could call it that. But if you look at where we're at, we were just maybe half a mile away from the South Tucson where he served.
Yes.
So yeah, we were right there. So we all say we're in that area. We're all from South Tucson. So when we say South Tucson, I know that it's a city within a city, but we all
Yeah. Yeah.
consider that part of the greater South Tucson area.
Right on, man. So would you guys go to Wakefield Middle School as well?
We did. We went to Hollinger, which at the time was called Government Heights, and they switched it to Hollinger named after a principal. And then we went to Wakefield, and then we went on to Pueblo High School.
Hollinger is right there on. Is that the one on?
Right on Ajo. That's right. Right on Ajo, almost before 2 streets before you get to 6th Avenue.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay, so you went to Hollinger, Wakefield Middle School, and then Pueblo High School. And what was John like growing up as a kid, man?
Yeah, John was. He always called me the serious one. I guess I still am to this day. I don't ever recall him ever getting upset about anything. I would look at him and say, "Hey, does anything ever bother you?" He goes, "No, I'm just going to roll with it." I guess I tried learning that, but I just couldn't do it. I was always pretty serious. Still am pretty serious, but that's the beauty of him. And if you talk to many people that knew him, he was always jovial. He was always happy. I don't think anything ever bothered him. In fact, one of my friends, who is a good friend of mine, Ricardo, from Pueblo High School, he said they were at the U of A. Some guy ran into him, knocked him down. In fact, I think my brother was more concerned. I think I probably would have gotten upset. But my brother just said, "Hey, are you okay?" Picked him up, dusted him off. My brother's shirt was torn, and that didn't even faze him. Ricardo looked at him and said, "God, aren't you upset?" He goes, "No, why should I be?" That's the kind of person he was.
There you go, man. Right on. And so you guys were pretty close. Grew up in the south side of Tucson right there. And tell me about your parents, man, your mom and dad.
Oh yeah, my parents. I'm always going to be biased. They're Jesse and Juan Valenzuela. Very simple parents, but I tell you what, I always say heart of a lion, soul of a Spartan warrior. I do a lot of public speaking. People say, "Why do you say that?" My mom was the lion. When she walked in the room, there was no messing around. When you messed around, you were going to find out. They say, play stupid games, get stupid prizes. And unfortunately, John and I think we're in the Hall of Fame of stupid prizes when we were young, but we learned. And my dad was always that Spartan warrior, very calm, very centered. Very few things ever bothered him. So I would say I was more like my mom, kind of spirited, serious, but my brother was probably more like my dad, Juan. Good parents, good people, humble. My dad worked at the mines. My mom was actually at Walgreens for many years. So she knew probably half of Tucson when we went somewhere. I don't think there's anyone that didn't know her. I said, "Mom, who
Which
don't you know?"
Walgreens did she work at?
The
Which
one on
Walgreens?
12th and Ajo.
Andale. Yeah, that's a very popular Walgreens, man.
And it's not there anymore. I guess they moved it across the street, but it's
Yeah,
still the old school one that people know. It's still the Peter Piper's right down. That's still there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, she worked there for almost 38 years. She was the head of Walgreens cosmetic department, and I would always go pick her up. We do things there, so that was always her place. Everyone knew my mom. I don't think anyone in South
Yeah, there
Tucson
was
didn't know my mom.
a used to be a grocery store where Peter Piper's is now,
That's
right?
right. That's
And
exactly
there's a
right.
laundromat like near it next door.
That's right. It
That
used to be. Then the Radio Shack. That's actually where John worked at. That was one of his favorite stores. Radio Shack. If you
Radio Shack.
Now I'm dating
Yes.
myself. If you ask the
Yeah.
younger generation, they have no idea what that is.
Yes, the Radio Shack, and then there was that, laundromat. I used to take quarters, and I was like, "Man, if I use these quarters to go play Centipede,
That's right.
I may not get my clothes clean today."
That's right. You had to decide whether you want to stack up your quarters on the asteroid game and there's like two guys in front of you, or you want to go do your laundry right. In fact, we used
Yeah,
to go there sometimes. My mom used to send us when we were
yeah,
the washing
yeah.
machine would give out some. Know exactly what you're talking about.
Right on, bro. So your brother, at which point did he or did you become aware that he had this ambition to being a police officer? How did that happen?
I think my uncle Eddie, he was actually a sheriff here in Tucson, or actually right outside of Tucson or in Tucson. And he talked to him one day, and I think it was always in him. In fact, I think a lot of that goes back to when we were kids. We would always pick, there was always a sense in our family of good versus evil. And I guess I always got stuck playing the bad guy. John always got stuck playing the good guy. And we talked about that, and we talked about that superhero mentality, good versus evil, Batman, and we'd go see all these movies. And that was him growing up. That was always something for us that he took with us. So I kind of knew somewhere in there. He started off with engineering. Obviously, I have my degree from the University of Arizona in engineering, a couple of degrees there from engineering from the U of A. But he decided to go into psychology. And then his senior year, in fact, he was a semester away from graduating. He said, "I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go to the elite academy and I'm going to become a police officer." We all looked at him at the table and he said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean you're going to become a police officer?" He said he's always felt that. And I believe, and you being a lawman yourself, Lou, and other people, and if you talk to most, I believe that people in law enforcement, they're not, I think the job finds them. They don't find it the job. I really believe that. And I believe it's a calling. It's something in their system. They were born with it. Something in their life actually brings that out to want to go serve. And I think anyone, obviously, it's tough being a police officer nowadays, but I think anyone that goes in that, it's a calling and it's always in their DNA. And I think something pulls it out. I don't know if it's an incident, injustice, whatever it is. And I think John just felt the calling to go fulfill that.
I think every little boy, little girls too, but I can relate to boys, right? Because I was a boy, now I'm an old man now, right? But we get that inkling, that feeling, that urge to serve other people in some capacity or other.
Yes.
You get that there's a knight in shining armor in all of us, and we want to go slay the dragon, and that's perfectly normal. Unfortunately, in today's time, they try to make that a bad thing. I think they call it male toxicity or something like that.
For sure,
but
yeah.
we need good men and women out there to go up against evil forces, evil people out there. So he got the feeling. Did you know that at the time? Before that, did you know he discussed becoming a law enforcement officer, or was it a complete surprise?
No, I wasn't. I think to my parents it was, and he would talk to me in confidence. He talked to my cousin Robert in confidence and my cousin Luis in confidence. I always mention law enforcement. We look at him, why do you want to do that? Just go become an engineer, do something safer. But he would talk about it more and more. And I think he had a conversation with my uncle Eddie, who was a Pima County sheriff, and I think it convinced him. Again, he spent time with them. So when he did it, we all supported him 100%. That's one thing in our family. You pick something. My parents always said, I don't care what you do. Just be the best at what you do. Don't care what it is. Yeah, don't go.
Tell me about Eddie. What's his last name?
Eddie Herrera. That is my mom's younger brother. He was the youngest of the entire Herrera family. So, they lived right across the street from Mission View, and truly in South Tucson. It's a big empty lot there right across the street.
Mm-hmm. Eddie Herrera. So was he the one killed in line of duty as well?
No, sir, he wasn't. It was actually his wife, my tia Bobby, her older brother. And this was Ernesto Calvillo. In fact, we're one of the few families, I believe, in Arizona. I don't know if there's any others, where we actually have two family members that were actually killed in line of duty. One, a Pima County Sheriff, Ernest, and of course, my older brother, John.
So your parents, they weren't excited about him becoming a cop, or were they like, go ahead and do it, you're going to be good at it, or what did they say?
My mom always had apprehension. She always wanted us to be safe every time, typical Latina mom, do something safe, mijito, this and that, got it. My dad was always, again, I talked about the heart of a lion, soul of a Spartan warrior. The Spartan warrior was my dad, and him said, mijo, go ahead and do that. That's the beauty of my parents. They were beautiful people. They always said, I don't care what it is, we will back you, but just be great don't be good, be great at what you do. And that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. And so he was already going to Alita. What year did he go to Alita?
I'd have to go back and check. That's a good question. I can honestly say I'm not sure exactly the year when he went. It would have been a couple of years, because he went from Alita to TPD and from TPD to South Tucson. So if we backtrack and kind of do the math quickly here, I would probably be somewhere about 91. It's 90, 91, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, probably 1990. Okay. Oh, how did you feel about it, man?
I had mixed emotions about it. I'm sitting there saying, hey, Johnny, you're literally 3 classes away from getting a degree in psychology. But he was hell bent. That's what he wanted to do. And I always said, like his younger brother, he's always going to be my role model hero. I said, I'll back in what you do. Go for it. Do it. Do exactly what you want to do. I know mom and dad, we would always have our discussions. And I said, Johnny, if you're going to do it, man. But I said, if you're going to do it, don't just go half in, go all in. We always said this saying, always approach everything not with your eyes closed, but with your eyes wide open. And that's what he did.
Got it. So John goes to the academy. He's now at South Tucson, and so he was a school resource officer, an SRO.
Right. He was at Mission View Elementary School, right there, literally right across the street from my grandmother's house.
Bro, I went to Mission View, bro.
Yeah, and my mom went to Mission View. I think half of South Tucson went to Mission View. It's been around for a long time.
Yes. The lunch ladies were my best friends, man.
Weren't they?
The best free breakfast, the best free school lunch. I still remember today the school lunch, man. That school was near and dear to me, man. The principals that were there, the teachers that were there.
Always good.
Benta Tai was a teacher there who changed my life. Mrs. Philman, Mrs. Cano, Mrs. Romero, principal, Mrs. Anderson, who was my first grade teacher. A lot of love for Mission View Elementary. So if you went to Mission View Elementary and you're watching, a lot of love for those of you who went to Mission View. Okay, I love that place, man. And so he's an SRO. Do you know what his duties were as an SRO officer?
Yeah, what he did, he was actually referred to as El Protector. That means he would come in and there was, in South Tucson, people have mixed emotions about law enforcement. Do they trust them? Do they not trust them? Are they on their side? Are they against
Yeah.
them? Obviously, we all kind of grew up with that a little bit, but we grew up a little bit different because we had always law enforcement and military around us. So to us, it was no big deal. So what he did there, he would go once a week. He would go visit the students, talk to them. They got to know him. In fact, I think he had a little office in the school. He would go around talking to schools. Some of the kids got out of the line and said, "You're going to have to go visit Mr. Valenzuela." And says, "Last thing you want to do is go visit a police officer." So that would really
Right.
straighten him up. So he would walk around the school, talk to the kids, and that was his thing, to build that relationship between law enforcement and these kids, to see that, hey, law enforcement, they're not bad people. They're good people trying to protect you from all the bad things coming in.
Right. Right. So that school was assigned to him to go kind of establish a relationship. And let me tell you something. I met your brother. I
Sure.
met him 1992 or 1993. I was in
Mm.
the military, okay? And I remember him, he was very calm, he had a very calm demeanor about him, you know what I mean? I think he had a fiancée or something like that, right, at the
That's right.
time?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
did.
yeah. Yeah, very kind guy, very friendly, and I remember meeting him, man, and I didn't speak much to him, but I was introduced to him through my law enforcement friends and connections and relationships, right? And so I remember, man, and so the SRO officer, he's there as a role model, as an example to kinda, you inspire a lot of people as an SRO officer,
You
so I'm
do.
sure he might have done a little bit of that, man. And so let's get to the time when there's a warrant apparently gonna be issued to
For
a
sure.
violator, right? What
Right.
was the nature of the warrant? Can you tell me?
For sure. Yeah, and then I can go into great deal. In fact, Lou, I'm glad
Yeah.
you had me on here for one reason. If you were to ask 1,000 people in South Tucson, over the years, it's 33 years. In fact, today is 33 years where he was killed in the line of duty. You're going to get about 1,000 different stories. So today, you give me the opportunity to tell you exactly what happened. So we clear the air. This is exactly what happened. What happened when he was in one day, he had a young female come to him and said, "Hey, there was a man down the street, did some things he wasn't supposed to." Of course, my brother, being the protector and kind of person that he was really upset about it. In fact, he didn't say much about it. Just he came home kind of really upset. And I said, "You okay? Can't talk about it. It's a pretty sensitive case." But so what he did, one led to another one. Before you know it, there was over 16 young females, 16 from that school, that this individual, and very few
Wow.
people know about that. In fact, I give Adelita Grijalva, and thank you for giving my brother the recognition. I appreciate that. The story was a little off, no big deal, but it was actually 16 young females, not one, 16 when it was done, and they ranged anywhere from ages 6 all the way to 11. 16. And that took him, I think he had to call in Lou the entire group in that entire school. I think he went through over 500 interviews. And out of the
Wow.
500, 16, because some of the young females weren't coming through. And then they said, "I know this person, this person." Then they started coming out. I think the
Wow.
investigation took him about 2 months. And he found out that,
Wow.
yeah, he was not happy with it. He was very upset about it. And that's where the warrant came in.
Let me ask you before you go on, was this violator, this suspect, was he an employee of the school or how was he
No,
in touch with the kids?
unfortunately, they knew that they were going to have to go arrest one of their own. He was a firefighter from the area, so they knew him. Yeah,
Okay. And he lived, I remember because it was like 2 streets down from Mission View, right? It
that's
wasn't
right.
too far down.
No, what made it accessible to him, a lot of the young females, there's this large alley that would cut right through the back of the school, all the way. Literally, it would end at his house, and you'd go right or left. And that's where, unfortunately, a lot of the young females had to walk through that, and they became victims of this individual. And it was a straight shot to his house. Unfortunately, as they passed through, I think he lured them in, and that's where that happened. So it was 16, quite a few of them, and it
Okay.
was literally 2 streets down from the school. I think you know the area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so he's investigating. There's 16 or so that at least come forward. They put the case together with him and some detectives, right, I'm sure, right, from South T PD, and then they take it to the county attorney, and then they issued a warrant. Is that where we're at?
That is correct. In fact, when they issued it, it was, in fact, two of his partners, Tuck, he was named Tuck, that's his nickname, and then also Dan Snyder, super good friends of his. They remember walking into the locker room, they hear all this banging and clanging, and then he walked around the corner, and they said, "John, are you okay?" He goes, "No, we're gonna get this guy, man. He hurt 16 of my young females, and we're gonna get him. I want to put the handcuffs on this guy. I'm not happy." He was throwing stuff around. He was really upset because he hurt 16
Wow.
of his young females, the kids that he loved.
In South Tucson, bro, I mean, Mission View Elementary in of itself, I went there, right? So it's a target-rich environment for a
It
lot of
is.
things, you know what I
It is.
mean? I mean, I lived all over South Tucson, bro. I mean, I wrote a book, and in the book, the incidents that I described early in my life are in South Tucson, okay? And so, a lot of stuff to see. A lot of good people there too. A lot of good people that grew up there as well. Business owners that I got to meet that inspired me. So Lang Tom was one of them. Just so many different people, man. And so for that to happen, these poor kids who are already kind of in some of them in dire straits, that's terrible, man. That's terrible. I
It
can see
was.
why John would have felt that way, man. So what happened from there?
Yeah, what they did is my brother and five other officers were at the house. In fact, when they rolled up, they kind of snuck in at a time where they knew maybe they could get him. They knew he was there because they had the house under surveillance. And then the person that was spotting stepped away. And as they pulled up, there was actually a female coming out of the house. So they grabbed her real quick and they pulled her away. My brother positioned himself in front. There was two that went to the side, two to the back. So they had the whole house surrounded. They got on their loudspeakers and they said they're here to arrest him. He knew he was going to be arrested. In fact, they heard through the grapevine that he had made threats that if he were to be arrested, he wouldn't be taken alive. That's why they took this very seriously. So not only my brother, but five other officers were there as well.
Got it.
So when they arrived there, my brother positioned himself right in front, like off to the right of the actual garage. Dan and Tuck actually walked their way into this one area, and they waited there for a little bit. They said, "Well, we're going to go in and get him." So they went into the side, and they thought it led into the house, but it led into this little room, which led into this other little room, which was just a washing machine, and then it led into the garage where there was a car there. He peeked around the corner. They saw the individual already had a gun. He knew they were there. They dove back. Dan threw himself behind the car. Tuck threw himself back into the washing machine, and they told him, "Hey, we're here to arrest you," and so forth. In fact, if you notice, I'm not going to mention the individual's name because I don't think it's worthy of even mentioning the individual's name
No.
here. But the individual, he had a gun and he started firing at him. So this close quarter. Yes, sir.
Let me pause you for 1 second, okay? So let me go back. So there's officers in the back. There's a full-on warrant to go in and enter and arrest this guy, right? So there's officers in the back. There's a total of 5 officers, and then I believe John was in the front door.
He was off to the side. In fact, if you look at from the house, he had the garage here, and the door was set back a little bit by about 10 feet.
Okay, got it. And so he's sort of in the front. Officers, you said they made entry through the back, or they were in the back?
They made entry to the back, then they thought it led into the house, but it actually led into this little room, which had the washing machine, which then led into the carport or the garage, which was closed.
I see. So now they haven't gone in the house yet.
No, they thought they were going to be in the house, but they didn't. Oh, and then he saw them. In fact, Tuck actually went around and he pulled back. That's why they threw themselves. One went to the right, one went to the left, because they saw the gun and he was pointing it at him. And then he stepped back and they said, "Hey, we're here to arrest you. You know why we're here." And then he just started opening up on him. He started shooting through the car, underneath the car. He actually started shooting through the drywall. There were bullets coming everywhere. And
let me ask you this: what kind of gun was it?
It was actually a hunting rifle. He had several, and then he had several magazines on him. So he had, in fact, when the whole incident was done, I think he had over 12 firearms. He had tons of ammo. So he was ready for a shootout. Yeah, he was ready for this. It wasn't something that he knew it was coming eventually, and he was ready for it.
So he had what do you have, like a hunting, like a 30-06 type of hunting rifle?
It was a hunting. It was an older one. Yeah, it was an older one, and I think he had a small clip underneath, and he had clips on him, so he just kept loading this thing. So he was ready to go. He had it on him, so as he dropped the clip, you'd hear the clip drop. And I think Dan mentioned to me he heard the second clip drop. So what he did is he positioned himself underneath the car just so he saw the door open slightly, so he saw his foot, and that's where he was underneath and he shot and he hit him in the foot. That's when he drew him back, and and everything stopped. But he was still firing through the actual drywall to try to hit Tuck, which is in the room. The thing that saved him was the actual washing machine, believe it or not.
Wow.
And then he went around through the front, and it was real quiet, and you could hear my brother, because I read the police report. And
who went around to the front?
My brother was actually still in the front. He kind of went in and he came back because the witnesses said they saw him, the other officer on the side. And they told him to come back because John actually was hearing it. He was calling on the radio for both of the guys, and they couldn't get to their radios because they were in a really close quarter gunfight. I mean, literally, you can imagine having a gunfight inside of a closet. That's what they did.
For sure.
and it was loud. They couldn't hear. They couldn't get to their radios. And John was sitting there calling them. This is his badge number was 225 225. He was, he went back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
Couldn't hear it, and there was all kinds of clatter inside. And my brother, based on what I was told, that he didn't move, and that's the beauty of my brother and the courage of him. Other officers were backed off a little. He stayed there. He was not about to leave. He heard the gunfight, which was right next to him, and it was so loud, but he stayed there. He did not leave his post. He was not going to leave his guys alone.
The guys are so they come into the back. They think it's the house. They're kind of caught up in like a little Arizona room looking thing, right? Like there's a
Right.
laundry back there, like a laundry room.
Right.
A suspect shoots out in their direction.
For sure.
There's a washing machine that kind of blocks some of the rounds. Officer from the outside underneath the vehicle shoots and hits suspect in the foot.
Right. In fact, you have to understand, Lou, this was closed. The garage door was closed, so they're closed in. They can't get anywhere. Dan's crawling, trying to get out. Tuck's stuck in there. They're literally pinned down. They cannot get out of there.
They're inside of a garage.
Inside of the garage. It's closed. Yeah, that's what made it so loud. So they're thinking, God, I can't go right or left. This guy could come around. And I talked to Dan later, and he said, I didn't know this guy was going to come around. Dan was trying to get out, but he stayed there. He was pinned down, and so was Tuck. They couldn't get anywhere. The garage door was closed, so he was crawling to try to get to it. And that's when he went underneath, and he had threw a couple of rounds and hit him in the foot, and he went back. And the police report states that he went around, and he was sitting there waiting for someone. He says, well, I see that there's two guys in the garage. Who's going to come around the corner? When they saw John, my brother, of course, I can only speculate what he was doing. He said, well, I'm calling for my guys, and the gunfight actually stopped. So he said, this is my time to make the move. So he was going to go and break the front door down. The guy was literally sitting there waiting for him on a window that you could look out, but you couldn't look in. The reason they knew he was waiting for him, there was a small little perch, if you will. He was sitting there, and there was a big pool of blood. They knew he was sitting there waiting for someone to come in. As he saw my brother come around the corner, of course, he had a hunting rifle. He had a clear shot at him.
Yeah.
It was probably maybe 8 feet away where he hit him. He hit him on the left part here, left part of the ear, or I'm sorry, the eye. And then they saw him go down. And everyone's saying, officer down, 225 is down, 225 is down. They're saying, no, 225 is not down. So it was a lot of confusion.
Right.
So what Dan told me is he's sitting there crawling to try to get up. So he finally got to the bottom part of the garage. It's one of these old-fashioned garages. You have to lean down. So he's leaning down. Tuck comes around, positions himself right in front of the car, right in front of the door, low. So when the person comes out, he has his gun straight ahead. He's not looking down. And he was able, and then Dan was getting ready. He said that he had the gun right on Dan's back and was about to shoot him too. He didn't see Tuck, which was literally 2 feet in front of him, below, really low. So he's looking ahead, not down. And that's when Tuck hit him 3 times in the chest, hit him 3 times center mass, and dropped him, shot him back. It fell back. Dan was able to get the door open. He got out. He said, the witness had said when they opened up the garage door, they said there was just this big smoke and odor of gunpowder, bullets everywhere. In fact, I think when the investigation was done, 68 rounds went off in that whole thing within about 10 minutes or 8 minutes.
When, we get back to your brother here in a second, but let me ask you this. Had this suspect, had he already been interviewed before that, questioned?
There had been some question about that. Obviously, you see an older gentleman, and I use the term loosely there, a person. Let me clarify. Let me strike that. A person, no gentleman here, that actually was little girls coming in and out. He's alone. People started questioning that, and I think there was some talk about that. This doesn't look right. People started asking questions. I think he was interviewed. Said nothing was going on. They were just friends. But they had the eye on him. They knew something was up.
Okay, so he'd been interviewed by police, so there wasn't that much of a surprise.
No.
And here's another thing, if we're having a frank conversation here, right?
For sure.
He was he Salty Fire?
Unfortunately, yeah, he was.
Okay, so they're like right next to each other, man.
They're literally like, in fact, if you go to South Tucson PD, you go down a hallway, take a right, and there's a door, and you're in the actual fire station. They're literally they're married next to each other.
Okay, got it. So any chance that he may have gotten wind that way from the?
Don't know. In fact, I think at the time, he was retired at the time, but there was some, I hear through the grapevine, there was some, I can't confirm it, there was some conversation about that. There was always something that was odd about him. That's what they all said. They always thought he was an odd person.
Yeah.
Obviously, I wasn't there. I'm only going by what I was told.
So your brother goes in, the door comes open. Is it your brother that opens the door? John?
No, in fact, where he was shot, the door was never open. The individual sitting there with his rifle, there was this big door, his front door, and then there was a slit. and it was a window that you could look out and you couldn't look in. He saw my brother come around the corner, getting ready to kick in the front door, and that's when he shot him. He had a clear shot at him. I mean, an absolute clear shot, about 8 feet away. And that's when he hit my brother here in the lower part, and he went down. And then then he went back around, and that's where Tuck dropped him. He went back, and then they opened up the garage door, and then everyone came in, and it was just complete calamity. At that point, it was about maybe 7, 8 minutes. There was probably 168 rounds. In fact, they interviewed Tuck afterwards. He said, "No, I just fired a couple of rounds." But both of them in that gunfight didn't realize that they used I think Tuck said he used about his entire clips. He had 4, and the one he had 5.
Yeah.
Dan said he thought he only used 1. He used all of them. In fact, he used 6. He had 1 in his gun, 2 in front, 2 in the back, and then he had an extra. He used them all. Didn't even know he used them all in the gunfight.
That happens. You lose the track of time.
For sure.
You're caught in this moment where you're just relying on training, and sometimes you lose count on how some people actually count their bullets. It's really weird.
That's right.
Some people have no idea. It's this time space disorientation, right?
That's right.
So your brother gets hit in the eye, right below the eye. Obviously, died instantaneously at the
He
moment.
did.
What did the paramedics say to you? Was there any life?
In fact, they had already called. In fact, when the gunfight started, they called SWAT. Obviously, South Tucson doesn't have a SWAT. Sheriff SWAT was on their way, but obviously, SWAT just doesn't show up. They're not like Batman. The bat signal goes up and they show up. It takes a while, and South Tucson didn't have a SWAT team, so they called the SWAT team in, but they were about 45 minutes out, so they had a hold. This gunfight was going on. What they did do is when they opened up the door and John was down, the paramedics grabbed him. They dragged him all the way out to the street. In fact, just about 2 years ago, I had one of the paramedics, her name is Sharon, reached out to me. She said, "Hey, are you John Valenzuela's younger brother?" Well, I'm the paramedic that worked on him. Wow. I called her up. We had a really, frank conversation. What she said is when she pulled him out, she's the one that actually started cutting off his vest and they started working on him. And they could tell the wound was pretty severe. In fact, as they were sitting there doing chest compressions, another paramedic had to sit there and actually plug the hole in his face so the blood wouldn't come out. I'm able to talk about it now. I know it's very graphic, but again, I think everyone needs to hear the story. There's no sugarcoating here. It is what it is. They tried reviving him. They put him on the ambulance, and they actually hit him with a large needle this big of adrenaline. They thought they had a heartbeat, but what a doctor said that my brother didn't feel anything. So when it went through his eye, it lodged in the back of his brain, the part that actually controls the involuntary parts of your heart and breathing. So he was dead before he hit the floor, and there was no way of reviving him.
Wow. So what was that day like for you, man?
It was really odd, Lou. Yeah, when that day happened. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to end it that my brother's. He was the police chief at the time. They before they took him, he says, I need to get them. They opened up his where he carried his 2 handcuffs. He would always carry it in front. He had 2 pairs. They grabbed him. They put the handcuffs on him because that was John's arrest. So he said he did it. So they made sure that John's handcuffs were on him.
On the suspect.
For sure. Yeah, for me, that day was really odd. I just graduated from the University of Arizona, started working at Motorola. I'm an engineer. Never had any desire to be a police officer. I don't think I have the temperament for it. I think it takes a special person. I didn't have the calling. I remember looking at the clock for whatever reason, 4:15. That's actually when it happened. I felt kind of sick. Didn't feel it's like, yeah, that's odd. I said to my boss, "Hey, can I go home a little early?" He said, "Yeah." So I went home, just kind of. And that day we didn't have cell phones, so obviously my cell phone would have been going off. I went home and relaxed. I said, "Oh God, I got to do lunch. Let me just take a little nap." So I took a little nap there, and then I hear the knock at my door, like it's 7:00. And I'm like, "Man, who's at my door?" And it was a really stern knock. I look outside. There's 2 police officers. I'm like, "What do these guys want?" And I opened up the door, and they said, "Are you James Valenzuela?" Yeah, I'm looking. I'm like, "God, what did I do wrong? Did I not pay a parking ticket or a speeding ticket?" Or I was like, "Oh, they got me."
Yeah.
But then they told me the story. They said, "Hey, we got some bad news." And the first thing I thought about my parents. I'm like, "No." They said, "Your brother was in a shootout and unfortunately was killed." You know what's odd, Lou? That the first thing I asked, I still remember it like it was yesterday. Did they get the guy? I said, yes. They returned fire on the suspect and they killed him. I said, that's all I needed to know. And I asked them, what do we do? He said, well, we have a helicopter waiting for you at St. Joseph, which is right down the road on Mesa. It's a Pima County Sheriff helicopter. They're ready to take you. I said, no, I'm good. I think I'm going to drive. They looked at me and said, you're going to drive? I said, yeah, I'm going to drive. I need to just clear my mind because I was still trying to process. I remember throwing clothes and I think I threw deodorant, toothpaste, and everything there in this bag. I don't know. I didn't even know what I grabbed. I just threw it in and I just got in my roadie. It was an Isuzu roadie. I was always really proud of it. It's my first car out of college. I thought it was the coolest car, still is. And I remember they said, well, when you get off, we're going to have a actually a police officer or actually highway patrol waiting for you at this particular exit. Just stay behind them. And I said, what do you mean? They're going to be waiting for you. So I drove up and I said, and they said, are you James? Yeah, just follow me. I'm like, don't matter how fast we're going, just follow me. You know, Lou, that they cleared the entire highway from, it's always hard, still hard to talk about it, Lou.
Of course it is, man. I totally feel it, bro.
What they did, Lou, is they cleared the highway from uh, Chandler all the way to Tucson. They kept passing me off, and they literally cleared off.
Wow.
And I think the part that really they handed me off to the last officer, which was I think he was right. He stopped. He pulled ahead of me, and I was imagine it looked like I was chasing them, but they cleared it up. And I still remember the last officer at right before Miracle Mile. He was underneath. He got out of his car, and I think I was a highway patrol. He gets out, and I remember his light on himself, and he saluted me as I just remember looking really quick to the left, and he saluted me as I passed by. I still remember, I don't know who the officer was, but he just saluted me as I passed by. And remember, we were going pretty high speeds, and they literally cleared the entire highway all the way from Phoenix to then they were moving people all to the side. They said, do not stop, just stay behind them. I remember pulling up to my parents' house, and there was all kinds of people, tons of people, media. It was really hard. I saw my parents, and it's hard, and my mom. It's just a really hard thing. You're sitting there still trying to process it. But I tell you what, Lou, I gave myself. I knew from that point on that life was going to be different. So I gave myself an hour to more. And in fact, Chandler usually takes about about an hour and 25 minutes. I made that trip in 55 minutes.
Wow.
And of course, I wasn't going to get a ticket or anything. I was actually being escorted by the police or highway to get there. So when we got there, there was a lot of people at the house. It was crazy, aunts and uncles. My main thing was just to move over and try to get to my mom and dad and give them a big hug. And I told my mom and dad right there, I kneeled in front of them and said, we're going to get through this. Don't worry, I got this. And I knew from that point on, Lou, even me crying right now is always hard. But, I don't cry too much about it, Lou. I do every so often. But I don't know why every time I talk about that one part where that police officer saluted me, that still always to this day still gets me emotional.
Man, it was an honor. They were honored to be there, and they were also mourning for you.
For sure.
And that's the way the blue line works, man.
For sure.
When you got to your mom's house, and your dad's house, what did your mom and dad? What was going on with them at the moment? What did they say to you?
My dad was in complete shock. My mom was mijo this, mijo that. Your brother's gone. It's if you've ever, I say this two things as Latinos. I think we have down. We have weddings down. We have funerals down, and we know how to mourn. I know it sounds odd, but we do. And, my mom just hugged me, and, she was sitting there shaking. I told her, Mom, we're going to get through this. No worry. And that's one thing, Lou, at that time, I knew I had to be the strong one. I had to be that rock that entire family broke himself against.
Right.
I couldn't show any emotion after that. I kind of shut down for a long time. And I knew we had to get through this. And I said, don't worry, Mom, we're going to get through this. Dad, we're going to get through this. I got you. And that's all I had to do. And it's always been, even to this day, Lou, even though my mom and dad are no longer here, it's still my duty to do that. And that's why sharing the story is so important.
Yeah. So you get to your parents' house, other people I already knew. You got a police escort, a lot of respect for that. And you get home. Did you guys get a chance to? Did your mom get a chance to view your brother? A lot of times parents want to do that.
Yeah. In fact, my mom. They had already taken him to St. Mary's, and they had already cleaned him up, and they actually put a Band-Aid over it. They didn't want my mom to see it. They allowed my mom and dad to go in. I was already on my way, so I couldn't see him. So they had him all cleaned up. They had him washed up, so they cleaned him up really good. And my mom said she remembers walking in, like she said that Mijo, it looked like he was just sleeping. He looked like he was taking a nap. And she didn't, the face wasn't, it was covered up. I think they even touched it up so they couldn't see the wound. And then they covered it up. It looked like he had a Band-Aid over a part of his eye. Yeah. And, of course, they said they saw him, and that was it. What happened is, if we step back a little bit, my dad worked at the state building. They sent a police officer to go get my dad. My dad, of course, he was a maintenance guy. He dropped everything. They took him in the car. He remembers the officer really cringing. He said, hey, we just got confirmation that the South Tucson police officer who was shot has died in the line of duty. He's pronounced dead. My dad heard it. He looked over to my dad, sir, I'm sorry. He says, don't worry. My dad, that's the kind of person, he's really cool. they went to Walgreens, and then they had two officers go pick up my mom at Walgreens, and they took her out through the back. And my mom, they
Yeah.
had to almost carry her out. She was, she couldn't be consoled. She was really upset, and you can only imagine what's floating around in your head. That's one part I try not to think about. So they took her out the
Yeah.
back. They took her home. They brought my dad home, and everyone just started conversion in the house. And I was the only one on my way over. I talked to my parents briefly. I said, "Don't worry, I'm on my way." And it took about 55 minutes when I got there, and then it became my responsibility to take care of them from that point on.
Someone always has to.
Right.
Someone has to. Leadership has its privileges and its price, and it's important that you stood up and did that for your mom and dad because someone has to.
Sure.
But it's important also that you mourn that whole loss. You have to go through that process of not just that hour to mourn, but you have to go through that entire
You do.
process.
You do. And that's for me, Lou. That's why I'm glad I've told that. So that way, so never be a question about the entire story, because that's the way. That's exactly how it happened. And
Wow.
and I get so many versions. And again, it wasn't one female; it was 16 females.
Wow. Let me
16.
ask you this, man. What type of what kind of
What kind of son was he?
yeah,
He
your
was
mom and
Karen, I learned from my brother and probably all the things not to do. And it's odd that he became a police officer. And I think a lot of police officers, I think, I won't speak for you, Lou. I'm getting to know you. I think you're a really cool guy. Thank you for everything. But I think most police officers have a little bit of a rebel in them. And if you talk
yes.
to a lot of police officers, they were not probably the model student, model professional, model anything. But that's what drew them to that, because they know the human character. And I think they're able to handle that. And that was him. He was not perfect. He was always doing things. My mom seemed to always be yelling at him. People say, "Why don't you yell at your youngest?" Well, I saw my brother and I said, "Well, I don't want to do that, so I'll learn from him."
Yeah. If you could talk to John today, what would you tell him, man?
For me, it's always, people always say, "Well, James, why do you fight so hard for him?" Because I'm the only one here. And it's a promise I made to my mom and dad that as long as I'm here, as long as God gives me breath, I will always make sure. And it's odd that my brother died during National Police Week. As you know, this entire week is National Police Week. I don't
Yes.
know if God's way of bringing attention to that. In fact, Lou, I'm not sure if you're aware, the average every year. In fact, my brother's year when he was killed in May 17th, 1993, actually had one of the highest numbers of police officers killed in the line of duty. It was 158. There's something on the order going back to the days of when they first started keeping this memorial. It goes back to the days of old time sheriffs, the 1800s. I think they try to go back. I think there's something on the order about 28,000, somewhere in that order, over as long as they've been keeping history. I don't know the exact number. I
Yeah.
may be off, but
Yeah.
there's quite a few. So if anyone ever thinks that being in law enforcement is a danger, it absolutely is a dangerous job. And that's all I ask people. When you see an officer, you have to understand they are the thin blue line. They're the individuals that keep the monsters away at night. So if I could tell my brother, if you were to bring my brother here and I said, "Look, John, I'm proud of you," and I have huge, and I think sometimes I suffer from that. I always want everything to be perfect. I got my mom's shadow, my brother's shadow, and my dad's shadow. Big shadow, big shoes to fill, but it's a responsibility that I take on. I would always tell him that I'm proud of him, and I'm trying to do the best job I can. Sometimes you fail, sometimes you don't. But for in our family, he's the gold standard, what it means to be, and that's why I tell people he truly is my Superman, truly is my hero.
And what do you want people to remember him as? Everything you just described, and what else? What do you want people to remember him as?
Oh, he was the calmest of the two. He was the more centered of the two. That's why I would never be a police officer. I think that's why I became an engineer. He was an individual that cared about a lot of people. In fact, I hear people like you. I hear people like my friend Ricardo. I hear a good friend of his. Her name's Sylvia. So many people that I'd say, "Hey, I knew your brother. I knew your brother. He liked to joke. He had a good time." My brother lived life in the moment. I have a hard time. I'm always thinking about the past and the future. I can't focus on the moment. Maybe it's my ADD that kicks in. But for him, he always enjoyed the moment. I looked at him and I said, "Man, I always admired that. I wish I could, even to this day, I wish I could do that." I want to
Yeah.
remember him for the brave person that he was. And I tell you, if you were to ask him, knowing that it was the pain that he was going to cause, not him, he didn't cause it, but his loss to us and everyone around him, Lou, I guarantee you, being the Superman and the superhero that he really was, he would say, "I would gladly do it again," because this man hurt 16 little girls and he wasn't going to have that. He said, "No, it needs to end today." And it
Your
didn't.
parents, are they still alive or they passed away?
No, my mom passed away about 9 years ago. My dad about 6. My mom passed away from liver failure. My dad from Parkinson's. I was there thank God when they both passed away. And I buried my mom with parts of the uniform. My dad in particular, I buried him. He always the police his police utility belt. Everything minus the gun. I put everything in there. I shined it up, and we actually buried him with him. I buried some of the
Wow.
uniform with my mom and dad. I tell other people too that I have my degrees from college, but Lou, I only have copies of them. I buried John with one. I buried my mom with the other, and I buried my dad with them. I didn't earn those, Lou. They did, and they gave me that courage to be what I am today. So I didn't earn. They did. I did it for them, and that's the kind of parents we had. I look at other people that don't have that kind of parent in their life, and I thank God for the type of parents. My parents were serious. They were heavy-handed at times, but I wouldn't trade it for the world because that made me the individual and the man I am today. And I spend a lot of my time public speaking with young kids, and I actually bring my brother's story into this quite a bit, and I
Yeah.
share with them that guys, we don't have forever, and we have to live every day as if it was their last.
And I was at the funeral. I went to the funeral, I remember, and it was quite the funeral. Police came from all over the place,
All
man,
over.
from all over the place.
There was
I remember there
about
was
5,000 people. Lou, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. There was about
Yeah, no, you're
5,000
fine.
people.
There was a lot of people, I remember. I went and, I was in the military. I was assigned to a civilian law enforcement support role in the military, and I think it was Sergeant Keith St. John. I went with him from the sheriff's department, and I was in my Army uniform to honor your brother. I remember seeing now I know it was you now that I see you here today. I remember seeing you there, your parents there. I think sh John had a fiancée, right? It was
He
not a
did.
girlfriend, it was fiancée,
Yeah,
right?
he did.
Fiancée was there.
Right.
Just so much community representation, you know what I mean? And it was so near to me because I was in South Tucson when it happened. And, I grew up in South Tucson. I went to Mission View, inspired by so many of the law enforcement officers there and around the communities and everything. And it was hard for us, man. It was hard for us. But it's an honor for me to be here with you sharing your story because I've never forgot it, man. I've never forgot it. And city of South Tucson has done I think their best to honor him by naming a center after him, right? Is that
Right.
correct?
It's on 6th Avenue. It's called the JVYC. And if anyone's hearing this today, it was a center that was named after, but inside there's a memorial we put that documents its entire life. So obviously we only have that short time here with you, but if you ever want to see him from when he was born all the way till when he was killed, you'll see his entire story. 5,000 people at his funeral, all that's documented. In
Okay.
fact, if you look at his name in the Bible, in fact, the name John actually means given by God. It's a Hebrew name given by God. So that truly was.
Got
He
it.
was a gift to us. And the thing that I learned from my brother, he was only here 28 years, but some people spend an entire lifetime trying to make an impact. He made an impact in 28 years. He continues to do that. My brother lived life and he faced his death not with his eyes closed, but with his eyes wide open. That's what I admire most
Yeah.
about it. And he didn't leave. He didn't leave his post. He heard gunfire going all over the place, rounds really loud. He wasn't about to leave, and he was right to go into the front door. He had no idea what was about to happen. He had his gun drawn, ready to go. As soon as he turned the corner, and that's when he was hit. And I knew my brother, the type of person he was. He was not going to run. And I use that in my speeches with a lot of young kids. Be comfortable in the burning building. I'm not telling people to go run to gunfire unless you're a police officer, but run to those things. Don't run away from them. That's what makes us
Yeah.
who we are today. And that's the kind of man I try to be because I got big shoes to fill, and hopefully one day I'll
Yeah.
fill them.
And by the way, your brother also got a very honorable mention today, or I think it was yesterday, by Adelita Grijalva,
Right.
congressman,
She did.
mentioned him. Fortunately, it was done now. Finally, give him some respect. So you and I both wish it would have been done sooner, but nonetheless, it was done. So we're grateful for that.
For sure.
Any other last words, sir? Anything else you want to say that as we leave and those who see this hopefully can take away from?
No, absolutely. I think the message here, my brother, he would probably say, guys, why are you having this? I'm good. I'm fine. In fact, he's in a lot better place than you and I will ever be right now. So that brings me comfort. But I think the part that I want everyone to know is that we live in this environment of anti-police, defund the police. I hate the police. I hate this. I hate that. Let's be real frank here. These are men and women that strap on the gun, the badge, their chest plates, and they go in their cars. Some of them knowing that, 28,000 just this year, I think the total was 120. That's the average that don't come home. Remember, this brothers, sisters, moms, dads' lives have been ruined. I've been carrying that burden for 33 years. So people need to understand that job, don't criticize the people even if you spit in their face, even you call them names, you call 911, that same officer is going to come and save you. It's not a social worker. Hey, I have friends that are social workers. I love that profession, but they're not going to save your family if you're in a hostage situation with a gun to your head. It's that man and woman and that have that badge that are going to come in and save you. And we have to always remember to have the utmost respect. You may not like them, but these are the individuals, that thin blue line that keeps the monsters away at night so you can sleep well at night. We have to have a level of respect. I don't know where the society has gone wrong where we hate police. And when I was growing up, they were the true role models. You said, thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I don't know where we've lost that. I don't know why the society has gone south and we hate cops. We need to love these people because they are the one thing that keeps away from the monsters. You and I can sleep well at night because they're keeping those monsters at bay. We have
That's
to
right.
give them
Well,
respects and thank.
yeah, I think we need more cintarazos in the home.
Yeah, my mom. Well, yeah, I know exactly. My mom was a chancla. My dad was a cinterazo. Yeah, it was always hanging on the door. God, I hated that thing. Hated that. But
Take a
yes,
turn, bro. Well, man, you know what John would say to you today, bro? You know what he'd say to you, man? He'd say, "Thank you. I'm proud of you."
sure.
You know, and he'd be like, "Damn, dude, I'm proud of you, bro. Thank you for everything." Woo! All right, so this is Lou Pimber. I want to thank you for watching today. Like, subscribe, share. Let's make sure we do our part to keep John Valenzuela's name alive, honoring his legacy, honoring his sacrifice, and others like him. Again, I'm honored today. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Talk
Lou.
to you all very soon. And let's keep being good people, okay? Let's be examples and role models we can become worthy of being followed. Talk to you soon.